John F. Kennedy walked into that barbershop alone that Saturday morning and nobody recognized him. But when the old man in the next chair started crying and the entire room went silent, Kennedy did something no one in that barbershop ever forgot. For the rest of their lives, Georgetown, Washington, District of Columbia, November 9, 1961, 9:22 in the morning. The sky over Wisconsin Avenue was the particular gray of a city that had not decided yet whether it was going to rain, and the leaves on the oaks lining the sidewalk had gone the deep amber color that Georgetown only wore for about 3 weeks each year before the wind took them. A man in a plain dark wool coat and no hat walked up the 3 stone steps of Caruso and Sons Barbershop and pushed open the glass door with the small brass handle and stepped inside without anyone looking up. The shop smelled of talcum powder and bay rum aftershave and the particular warm air that old radiators produce when they have been running since October. There were 4 chairs. 2 were occupied. A boy of about 12 was in the first chair, getting his ears lowered by a barber named Sal Caruso, who had opened this shop with his father in 1938 and who had cut the hair of 3 generations of Georgetown families without once asking. Man is politics. In the third chair sat an old man. He was perhaps 72 years old, with white hair combed carefully to one side and a pair of large hands folded in his lap, and the kind of face that had once been strong and had not lost its structure even as the years had taken the weight from it. His name was Walter Purcell. He had driven a city bus on the Wisconsin Avenue line for 31 years. He had retired in April of that year. He was wearing a pressed gray shirt and a brown cardigan with 2 buttons missing and shoes that had been polished that morning. The man in the dark wool coat took the chair nearest the door and picked up a newspaper from the low table beside it and opened it without reading it. He sat the way a man sits when he is not trying to be noticed, slightly forward, coat still on. The newspaper held at the angle of a man who wants a barrier between himself and the room without making the barrier obvious. Sal Caruso glanced at him once from the first chair and nodded and went back to the boy's haircut. The second barber, a younger man named Pete, who had been with Sal for 4 years, was sweeping the black and white tile floor near the back and did not look up at all. For 6 minutes the shop was quiet except for the sound of the scissors and the boy asking his barber whether the Washington Redskins were going to make the playoffs, and Sal giving the diplomatic answer of a man who had learned not to promise anything about football. Then Walter Purcell made a sound. It was not a loud sound. It was the kind of sound a man makes when something inside him gives way quietly, the way a beam gives way in a house that has been holding too much weight for too long. He pressed the back of his large hand against his mouth. His shoulders moved once. Pete stopped sweeping. Sal's scissors slowed. The boy in the first chair went very still, the way children go still when they sense something adult and serious entering the room. The man in the dark coat lowered his newspaper. He looked at Walter Purcell. Walter was not looking at anyone. He was looking at something in the middle distance that was not in the barbershop at all. Something only he could see. Something that lived in the particular geography of a grief that had been carried a long time and had chosen this warm Saturday morning in a barbershop on Wisconsin Avenue to finally make itself known. Sal Caruso opened his mouth. He was a kind man, and he would have said something gentle. The man in the dark coat spoke first. His voice was quiet and unhurried, and had in it the particular quality of a man who has learned that the most powerful thing you can do when someone is in pain is not to fix it, but to acknowledge it without flinching. He said, "How long?" Walter Purcell turned his head slowly. He looked at the man in the dark coat. He did not know him. He looked at the face, the jaw, the eyes, the plain coat with no insignia on it. And he did not put it together, and he did not need to, because the question had been asked with such directness and such absence of pity that it did not matter who was asking. He said, 41 years. The man in the dark coat nodded. He set the newspaper down on the low table. He said, "What was her name?" Walter looked at him for a moment. He said, "Dorothy." He said it the way a man says a name he has said every day for 41 years, and expects to say every day for whatever days remain, and cannot imagine a single morning that does not begin with it. "The man in the dark coat," said Dorothy. He said it once, quietly, the way you repeat a name when you want the person across from you to know that you have heard it and are holding it carefully. Walter Purcell's hands unfolded in his lap. He said, 51 years we were married. She went in September 14th. She was making coffee. She just sat down on the kitchen floor and she was gone. I still make 2 cups every morning. I do not know how to stop. I do not know why I cannot stop. The barbershop was entirely silent. Pete had set the broom against the wall. Sal had his scissors open in his hand, but was not moving them. The boy in the first chair was looking at his own reflection in the mirror with the careful stillness of a child who understands he is witnessing something he should not interrupt. The man in the dark coat leaned forward with his elbows on his knees the way a man leans when he wants to close the distance between himself and another person without crossing the floor. He said, "You make 2 cups because 41 years of mornings do not disappear in September." He said, "You make 2 cups because some part of you is still keeping faith with the life you built together, and there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing broken about that." Walter Purcell looked at him. His eyes were wet, but he was not looking away. He said, "People keep telling me it gets easier." The man in the dark coat was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I think what they mean is that you get stronger, not that it gets smaller." Walter Purcell nodded slowly. He nodded the way a man nods when something has been said that he has been needing to hear for a long time and had given up expecting to hear from anyone. They sat together in the warm barbershop air for another moment, and then Sal Caruso cleared his throat softly and said, "Mr. Kennedy, sir, I can take you now whenever you are ready." Pete the barber went absolutely still near the back wall. The boy in the first chair looked at the mirror and then turned his head so fast Sal had to tell him not to move. Walter Purcell looked at the man in the dark coat for a long moment. The man in the dark coat looked back at him without changing his expression, without the particular tightening that comes into a face when a person has been recognized and is recalibrating the room. He simply looked at Walter Purcell with the same attention he had been giving him since the moment the sound had come out of the old man's chest. He said, "I am not ready yet." He stayed in that chair for another 22 minutes. He did not talk about the presidency. He did not talk about Berlin or the Soviet Union or the budget or anything that had been in the newspaper he had set on the table. He talked about mornings. He talked about what it meant to build a life with another person so completely that the architecture of every ordinary hour carried their shape. Walter Purcell talked about the number 42 bus and the particular way the light came through the windows on winter mornings on the Wisconsin Avenue line, and how Dorothy used to pack him a lunch every single day for 31 years, and how he had never once told her that the sandwiches she made were the best thing about any day that contained them. When Sal Caruso finally cut the president's hair, it took 11 minutes. When John F. Kennedy stood up from the chair, he reached into the inside pocket of his dark coat and left a bill on the counter without looking at the amount, and he shook Sal's hand, and he shook Pete's hand, and he looked at the boy who was now standing near the door with his coat on and his new haircut, and he said, "Good looking," and the boy was unable to speak for approximately 4 seconds, which was the longest 4 seconds of his young life. Then John F. Kennedy walked to the third chair, where Walter Purcell was still sitting, and he extended his hand, and Walter Purcell took it and held it, and John F. Kennedy said, "Dorothy sounds like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing every single morning for 41 years." Walter Purcell could not answer. John F. Kennedy held his hand for another moment, and then he let go and walked to the glass door with the small brass handle and pushed it open and went down the 3 stone steps and back out onto Wisconsin Avenue and into the gray Georgetown. Morning. Walter Purcell went home that afternoon to his apartment on Volta Place. He went to the kitchen. He filled the kettle. He set 2 cups on the counter the way he had set 2 cups every morning since September 14th. He stood in the kitchen for a long moment looking at the 2 cups. Then he made the coffee. He poured 1 cup. He left the 2nd cup empty on the counter next to the first one. He sat down at the kitchen table by the window where the light came in from the alley in the afternoon, and he drank his coffee, and he looked out the window, and for the first time since September, he did not feel that the silence in the apartment was something pressing against him. He felt that it was simply the silence of a place where a great deal of living had happened, and where the evidence of that living was still present in every ordinary object on every ordinary shelf. He kept the 2nd cup on the counter every morning for the rest of his life. Not because he could not stop, because he had decided it was the right way to keep faith with 41 years of mornings that had been worth every single one of them. He never told anyone who the man in the barbershop had been. Not because he was keeping a secret, because it did not seem like the point. The point was what had been said. The point was that a man had leaned forward in a chair and asked his wife's name and said it back to him like it mattered, which it did, which it always had, which was the only thing that had ever mattered from the very first morning to the very last cup. If this story reached something inside you about the moments when the most powerful thing a person can do is simply sit down and stay subscribe and share this with someone who knows what it means to keep 2 cups on the counter. Tap that thumbs up for more untold stories about the human beings behind the names that history remembered. Tell us in the comments about the person whose name you still say every morning even when they are no longer there to hear it. Ring the bell so the next story finds you when it is ready. Because some stories do not make the history books. They live in barbershops on Saturday mornings, and in kitchens on quiet afternoons, and in the space between 2 cups on a counter where one of them has been empty for months, but has never once stopped meaning everything.